Hi all, and welcome today to today's webinar, Driving Digital Transformation in Local Government Best Practice and Lessons Learned. I'd like to start today by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. For me here in Clermont in Queensland, that's the Wangang and Jangalingo people. I'd also like to extend the acknowledgement to traditional owners of the land wherever you may be joining us from today. I'd like to welcome our presenters today from Oracle and CountERPart Solutions. Online today we have Wayne Welcome, the Chief Executive Officer of CountERPart Solutions. We have Ganesh Shrivenkatesh. I practiced that how many times, Ganesh? The Executive Delivery Services, CountERPart Solutions. And we have Dylan Fernandez, who's the Master Principal Sales Consultant of Oracle. So between them, they have, I think I added up almost 80 years combined experience in digital transformations, IT, utility industries, and local government and government. So welcome. So councils across Australia are embracing digital transformation to improve operational efficiency and enhance ratepayer service. Yet 44% of strategic digital transformation initiatives in local government fail to meet original goals. And I'm sure many in the audience have experienced that. So this begs the question, how do councils best approach digital transformation projects to achieve their strategic objectives? So today's session will explore best practices for running a successful digital transformation project. We'll have a look at how to formulate the business case, factors to consider when evaluating solution, how to structure your project, where to start, lessons learned and best practices for engaging your team before, during and after project, because this can make or break your project. The session will be followed by a Q&A opportunity. So to submit your questions, please use the live Q&A button at the bottom toolbar of your screen. Feel free to submit those questions throughout the session and we'll respond to them after the presentation. So I'll hand it over to our presenters today and have a great time.
Thank you, Zoe. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Just want to walk you through, as Zoe said, just acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. And the approach we want to talk about is how do we work through those items that Zoe mentioned and bring people, process and technology together. So that's our main mission through this process. So let's get to it and talk about how to formulate the business case. So at CountERPart, we've actually structured some of our consulting approaches to support councils to really focus on how do we align the strategic drivers that are coming out of either your council plans or your community plans, the key objectives and outcomes, and then bring that back towards the solutioning. And so to start with that, what we want to do is join up from left to right and focus on what are the facilities and technology requirements that would drive the enabling changes within the business, which would then drive, let's call those the enablers, which will then drive the key business transformation changes. Those business transformation changes will drive organizational benefits, which will in turn deliver those transformation objectives or strategic drivers that you've got within your council plans. Easier said than done. So if I just walk through an example of that end to end, and I've given a little pictorial thing of, you can easily do this in a PowerPoint or a Visio yourselves as a team. But when we're looking at this, if we take a financial approach to what are the couple of key drivers around procurement? So we want to manage, look for facilities and technology drivers or solutions that will provide better supplier management and automate the source to settle function, if we just focused on those two. So if we looked at those two, what that would actually might do in the end is provide an automated form of process that would give that source to settle from a tender to contract award process flow as an enabler. The business changes that could come out of that may be procurement as a center of excellence, because you've now brought all of those processes into a consistent manner. You've automated those processes so you can have a center of excellence around managing that. The organizational benefits of that center of excellence could be that we now have supplier self-service, taking admin away from your procurement team, and an automation of the procurement processes from the tender evaluation, and the process of awarding that contract. The transformation objectives that may have sat with your overall drivers may have been, we want to see a reduction in materials and outsourced labor cost as part of the overall digital transformation process. So we sort of didn't want to start and go top down. We've sort of come at it from the bottom up. It's easier said than done. You'd look at it a couple of ways. You might start there and look for what facilities and tech you might need. But this actually gives you that flow that will allow you to outline the approach, if you like, of how you join up the key capabilities required to enable those business changes to drive those benefits. So you've got a joined up business case approach, if that makes sense. That will also allow you to provide a frame of reference for the portfolio of delivery, because now you've got what capabilities you require to deliver as part of that overall transformation process. And you can cut those up into tenders, processes, and projects internally, with business case driving it behind it. The example we might take in picking that up and looking at that is if we were picking up the reduction in cost to serve for the community services, and that's a key driver. Then when we look at our capabilities, some of the capabilities we might need is we need to understand what that cost to serve is. How much does it cost us to register a pet or manage animals in a council? So some of the key enabling technologies we might need, or capabilities we might need, is activity-based costing. And by its very definition, that will allow us to move towards zero-based budgeting. So those two items might give us the understanding of the cost to serve. Other capabilities we might need is to free up our staff to automate those administrative processes so they can start doing the analysis on those capabilities that we talked about. And then the final one might be, how do we automate some of those community service request workflows to reduce that cost of service? What we've found with our, if you like, benchmarking and process with councils is somewhere between 75 to 81% of council FTE costs are involved in managing community service request workflows. So when we understand that cost to serve, then we have a much better ability to actually drive towards administration savings, freeing up staff to do more important stuff for council, and also driving key benefits from a customer perspective and making it customer centric. So even though we are looking at this from a financial lens, we do have a customer centric outcome that we're focusing upon.
Yeah. So to add to that, Wayne, like we also need to look at the business changes and also the strategy that's driving the business changes, and then there could be some enablers. That is one of, like, if you're planning to move from a on-premise facility to the cloud facility, you need to probably consider that as part of your business case as well. So you got the business changes, the facility and technology enablers, and also the changes that needs to be done as a one-off change that will support the transformation for the organization or the council at this stage. Thanks, Wayne. Yep.
Thank you. So if we talk about how do you evaluate a solution, so what we talked about there was aligning those capabilities. So I might hand over to Ganesh, who will walk us through the approach we could take.
Thanks, Wayne. So when we look at the transformation solutions, we have to take an approach where we're looking at the end-to-end scenarios, how we evaluate. This traditional way of evaluating a tender would be we got multiple requirements, disjointed requirements, where the evaluation team would go and tick off or assess based on the requirements. But for a digital transformation, because it involves the business changes, technology changes, and also enablers supporting the change, we probably have to look at the scenarios end to end. so that the target state capabilities, what are the changes or the enablers or the automation that we're going to bring into the business. So if you have to look at a journey of, if you'll take the example of the supplier self-service portal, so we need to probably look at, as a supplier, when he uses the solution, what are the different touch points from a supplier perspective? And from an automation process perspective, if a work is completed by a supplier and the invoice is provided by the supplier, what is the automation that can be enabled as part of the digital transformation, where the touch points are reduced so the manual processes are automated? So these things have to be documented in scenarios. That's what we recommend, so that when we evaluate, you're getting a overall solution view of what the solution can provide as part of the digital transformation. The other important aspect is to have the vendors demonstrate what the solution end-to-end process would look like on the flow of the automation as part of the implementation. And the third component of the solution evaluation would be the customization versus out of the box function. So when you have the digital transformation, there's a lot of business processes that pre-built in some of the solutions. So we probably have to consider, should we adopt the changes or the processes that's already pre-built and tested elsewhere, or do we need to customize and start doing a greenfield approach where we start from scratch? That is a lot longer, and that could also cost a lot more when you do the digital transformation. The approach would be to adopt the best practices way of implementing an automation solution, and also looking at the journey mapping. Even if you're looking at the customer-centric view, is the same approach. We have an end-to-end process for a customer registering a pet or making a general inquiry with the council. So if you have those end-to-end processes, when the vendor does the demonstration of the solution or walks you through this end-to-end process, you get an overall picture of what is the touch points, what is the experience for the customer, what is the experience for the supplier, and how things fit in place together.
Yeah, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Just to add to those comments, so when you're evaluating solutions, are able to meet your current needs, but also flexible to make changes, which will meet any future regulatory requirements or business needs that may arise, as well. Look for applications that are configurable, as opposed to those that require customization. I suppose one of the main things here is that if you're doing a lot more customizations, it could impact, could have additional costs moving forward as well when there's upgrades and things like that, and that might need to take place. So configurable solutions will provide benefits such as easier to manage local government perspective, able to be maintained by councils. There's no need for system integrators or do any future work to incorporate these changes. This will result in the reduction of the total cost of ownership, the TCO, for local governments, as changes can be done and maintained by your staff members who have the right skills and access. Also, look for solutions that will, from your perspective, provide a better way of communicating and servicing your customers. Solutions that provide pre-built, and interfaces. Again, one of the main things here is lowering that total cost of ownership and the maintainability moving forward as well. And it goes without saying, looking for solutions that will bring the local governments into the 21st century and beyond. Thanks, Wayne.
No worries. Thanks, Dylan. So if I just recap for everyone, what we've done is we've defined a business case based upon future state or target state capabilities. Those capabilities are joined up to our strategic drivers. So we now have clear line of sight. And what we're suggesting is when we go and document how we want to evaluate the solutions that will deliver those capabilities, we'll align that to end-to-end journeys that actually deliver the capability that we're setting out in our process. And now you can very, very quickly assess from a solution perspective how that solution is actually going to be able to deliver that benefit. So there's a clear depiction of your evaluation, and it makes it a little bit easier for the evaluation team, and it also puts it into perspective so they can understand what that target state looks like. So when the vendors come back, they're able to tell you what that target state looks like, because often it's difficult when we're working in the same system for so long, to see what that looks like. So it gives us that perspective. Okay. So if we talk about, okay, how do we do this? So now we've understood what's out there in the landscape, in the solution space, and do we go big bang? And what I mean by big bang is one implementation that deploys the digital transformation initiatives or capabilities that we talked about in a big bang approach to the business. So we roll it all out in one big hit. So then the other approach is talk about it and look at it from a piecemeal approach where we can seek multiple vendors to deliver those capabilities we've outlined and pick the best of whatever's out there in the market to deliver what we want. So we'll just talk a little bit about both of those. And I think the key thing we're looking here is when you're looking at a big bang transformation, what you're looking for is a vendor that can actually provide that end-to-end picture across that landscape. So if you looked at our capabilities that were driving those enablers that we talked about in the first instance when we did our business case, we're now looking for a solutioning that delivers those capabilities that can stitch it end-to-end in that journey. So those business workflows in that end-to-end journey are really, really important. So if I give an example about that, if we talk about asset management and the asset management function, providing asset acquisitions ends up in a fixed asset accounting capitalization. So what we want to be able to do is seek a vendor that has a solution architecture that can talk about how the asset management function out in the field allows the business to perform that activity, but then ends up being automated. The capitalization process is automated back in our financial system. So the vendor has to come back with the solution architecture. In the piecemeal context of that, council has to have that understanding of that target state solution architecture understood, because then council's driving that. So council would be then saying, I can take this product and plug it into this product, and that will achieve that capitalization outcome that I just spoke about there. And the way to sort of tackle that is you need somebody in the business who is the person that owns that target state architecture and drives it, and that you establish it what I'll term a design authority or some sort of governance cadence that will assure that the end-to-end processes that are being delivered in the projects have that overall end-to-end solution in mind, so that we're keeping multiple solutions and multiple vendors honest to deliver that end-to-end process as part of our delivery. And I'll take points at the end on that one. We're happy to talk to that. So if we're talking about the big bang to start with, we spoke a little bit about seeking a proven. You need to find a proven vendor that's had successful deployments and transformation expertise, so that you can look at references, look at an end-to-end working integrated ERP, because you're going to basically take that solution, it's all plugged up together, so you don't get a lot of option around changing things out. All you can do is configure, or what I'll term localize, that solution to your business. The benefits are, though, you get a streamlined implementation because it's already pre-built that way, and there are cost savings, and that the process integration is seamless because the system talks to itself, so it's all end-to-end and integrated. It can reduce the impact of the complexity, because it can get very complex to plug up multiple solutions to deliver that stitched end-to-end workflow that I talked about before. And you need to also align those solutions to the legacy system, so it removes a lot of that complexity. The weakness of it, though, is that council puts a lot of effort into significant change management, because what we're doing is we're going live with the new world. So when we talked about the enabling changes and the approaches, that sort of effort we talked about, that will actually need to be considered as part of this approach and appropriately resourced within council. And then making sure that the business is being supported, so that the change in business readiness, resourcing within the business and within the project itself is resourced appropriately to meet that project cadence, because the speed. And I know there's been a couple of questions that have come up through the forum around what's the average time frame? So the time frame is dependent in this context around how much effort is required to actually get the business to move to that target state. Because you've defined what the target state looks like in your business case originally, you've defined what those capabilities are. You're now moving into a forum where you can actually say, this is what we're going to, when we've done, this is when we're transformed, this is what it looks like. What do I need to do to actually make those changes? Now you've understood what those business change enablers are up front. Obviously that's at a high level. Now we're getting into the detail. So, you know, I've seen councils that put a big effort into this, they can transform the entire end-to-end. So HR, payroll, finance, procurement, customer management, the customer request management, and property and rating within 2-year timeframe. So that is a fairly large piece of work up front. And most of the first year is about helping the business understand what that target state looks like. That can be accelerated to 1 year, but would need a lot of engagement with the business to rapidly bring them on that journey. So I think it's horses for courses. It'll depend on the council, and it will also look at how effectively you're able to provide that change view to everyone. Dylan, did you want to give any excerpts or understandings that you've seen around the Big Bang?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Wayne. I suppose we've got one regional council at the moment that's been working on a Big Bang approach and a full digital transformation of their solutions. The benefits of working with a vendor that has a clear architecture in place enables the local governments to see the vision of what they will get and how the end-to-end solution works together. As Wayne has stated as well, working with a vendor that can provide the end-to-end solution stack will reduce implementation costs in not having to integrate various applications in a piecemeal approach and potentially have interim integrations in place. Therefore, not spending money or throwing away money on interim integrations which may be discarded in time. Some of the lessons that that have been learnt along the way is from a local government point of view, just having that buy-in from the top management all the way down, so that when the project starts, everyone is on board and the vision and where the local government is heading. So everyone within the organisation is basically on the same page. One of the things that we've seen is that the people that go to the workshops have an open mind about how things can be done with the new applications as well. One of the things you don't want to do is replicate the current application in the new application when way of doing things. Open to the possibility of automating process steps where possible and needed, which might have been limited in the old application, as it might have not been able to be done due to limitations in the solution itself, and also the costly that those changes might take. Looking at this as an opportunity to look at improving business processes or steps within the business itself where bottlenecks might occur currently. As a result of this, that your staff will be able to focus their attention on items that really matter to the council, that really, that potentially would add more real value, which may not be possible right now due to constraints that may be currently within, the current solution itself. So, these are things not just from a Big Bang, but also from a piecemeal approach, things that I think that the councils should look for as well. Thanks, Wayne.
Thanks, Dylan. Let's talk a little bit about the other one. And I couldn't think of a better term for this. I'm sure there is one, but I'm just calling it a piecemeal approach. So what we've done is we've still understood our target state as a council, but what we want to try and do is implement this in our speed, in stages that we can manage. And we'll go out to market for the best solution that fits that stage. So if you cut up that original business case that we had and you define that into groupings of capabilities, that's what you'd go out to market for. So I want to sort of stress that we move away from the traditional solutioning approach to something that's more business focused. So when we talk about that, obviously financials and procurement maps to both, but there may be some components around customer request management and property where we talk about these are the capabilities that we're going out to market for. And then we're looking for a vendor that can provide that context to us, because they need to be able to deliver those capabilities. So the piecemeal approach can be very structured, and it can manage to council budgets and also council timeframes. The benefits are, by doing staggered deployments, we get quick wins. So we can do the transformation with lots of incremental steps. It's controlled. It's managed to, the change process is managed to the resourcing that's happening within council, and it can be prioritized for specific areas of departments that are needed for transformation. So there's some good benefits in this approach. The understanding we take, though, is when we do this, that target state architecture needs to be front and foremost, because what's going to happen is we get a brand new financial and procurement system. We've now got to plug that into our, I'll call it unkindly, our legacy spaghetti that we've got that's going on in the back there. And when we look at how we do that, we need to manage the interim stages, because there's a term that we use in the IT space called technical debt. Think of that as work we're going to do and throw away. There's a lot of technical debt that's incurred. So there's a lot of sunk cost, because what we're trying to do is plug each incremental stage of this piecemeal approach into our legacy spaghetti. So there will be things, there will be workarounds, because the new system might work in a new way. There'll be new capabilities and workflows, but that may mean that our legacy system, which can't deliver to that, we have to build some workarounds and processes and interim integrations to some of those systems, interim business processes, which may be there as long as it takes to get to the next deployment. So it's just something to be considered. There's pros and cons to the approach with that. And it's really just understanding what your current system looks like, what your current processes look like, and your movement to that new capability or target state capability, the approach we would take to that, if that makes sense.
I think there's other thing, Wayne, as well to this, which is the risk. Because if you go this approach, the council will have to be wary of what the end state and the risk of making sure the best of breed solution work together. That leads to the technical debt that Wayne was referring to. So, I mean, the risk profile shifts from a vendor who understands the solution, implementing the end-to-end solution, to the council driving the solution with the best of breed. That might work or might not work. That is something that's a risk that needs to be managed as well as part of this process.
It's a good point, because there needs to be that consistency of leadership within the council that drives to that, as I was mentioning before with piecemeal. So if there's a clear vision and a clear approach, and council knows what its target state looks like, then they can manage that outcome and understand the impact of that those interim stages and manage to that. So I might move on to the next one. So in that context, there's, and I'll talk a little bit about back office or front office in the context of both of those big bangs and approaches. So when you implement an ERP, regardless of whether it's big bang or piecemeal, the question comes across as, do we implement the back office or the front office first? And back office in this context is purely what we're talking about, the components of management that sit behind the customer side or the customer-centric side. Knowing that if we want to improve customer engagement, there needs to be a joined up process that may go from back office to front office and vice versa. So having that understood. But if we look at the back office implementation first versus front office will give us some real wins up in the customer space. We'll be able to provide automated customer engagement through workflows and self-service portals, and the ability for us to understand our customer and manage the property management and customer manage right up front. The downside to the front office first is I've now got to plug into my legacy spaghetti back here. And the biggest issue for us in doing so is understanding the new chart of accounts, what will it be? So I'm creating this whole structure and whole workflow approach, but I'm not able to capture any of that content in my solutions here. So the back office obviously is the financials, procurements, planning, budgeting, performance reporting, and asset works management. Not as sexy, but in our opinion, the back office is fundamental. It's the foundation for driving the transformation. And we would always encourage our clients to go with back office first. And the main approach to that is understanding a new chart of accounts that can provide that cost to serve approach, uplifting our staff through new talent management, recruitment, onboarding, and learning and development platforms in new HR will allow us to actually engage our business through the transformation using those tools. Providing new assets and works functions will give us efficiencies in how we operate, and that will translate to how we're servicing the community. And then managing projects and procurements will allow us to streamline the activities and administration of some of those works, activities, etc., that drive the improvements that we'll receive on the front. So from our perspective, I think we always prioritize the back office. And the main reason for that is it's the foundation of the transformation. And then what we can then do is plug the new chart of accounts into our existing front office capability, look to improve that. If we're doing it piecemeal, we would look to improve that. If we're doing it big bang, we might do 2 stages of big bang. We might do back office first and front office in phase 2. So phase 1 and then phase 2. And by doing that, we can focus on how we establish our foundation and then how we roll it out to the customer to get a better outcome. And building this integration platform in the bottom allows us to plug into all of our current third-party products, and providing analytics and data visualization on the top will allow us to even incorporate current solutions in that space until we've moved into our full transformation. If it's piecemeal, we would be doing the same thing, but we would be focusing on piecemeal approaches to the back office first before we even tackled how we'd manage the customer, if that makes sense. So how do we engage our teams into driving to deliver these outcomes? So I might throw to Ganesh, who can talk about the business transformation pyramid.
Thanks, Wayne. So thus far, we've spoken about the strategy, what's required as part of strategy, what's the business case, how are we going to select a solution, how do we implement a solution, big bang versus piecemeal. But all of this requires business engagement. Engaging the teams before, during, and after the project is essential for the success. Effective team engagement is something that's required all the way through change management and fostering a culture of continuous improvement throughout the transformation journey. So at one point, we were saying that the duration for the change would be up to 2 years if we have to consider the end-to-end transformation. So we need to probably keep that in mind and engage the business teams and the staff accordingly during the journey. They have to be part of the journey. The journey of change can be visualized through the business transformation pyramid, which consists of strategy, program, and project. So the messaging from the strategy level provides the overarching direction and the purpose behind the transformation. So it answers the fundamental question of why we are doing this change, why we are embarking on this journey, and what is the outcomes we're going to expect from this journey that we're going to embark on. Then we have the program, which answers the what, the focus on what and when aspects of the transformation. It outlines the specific initiative, milestones, timelines, because if it's a program is implemented over the period of 2 years, we need to know the milestones and the change that happens during this 2 years period. And also if you're doing the front office or the back office or the piecemeal, we need to map the journey at a program level so that the stakeholders are engaged and the staff are engaged. They understand, okay, we are doing this process now, but if you wait for another 6 months, when the entire solution is implemented, they get the full benefit. So at a program level, we will answer what and when things are going to be implemented or done as part of the transformation. And at the project level, how are we going to implement this transformation? It involves the implementation aspects or the actions, process, and technology. So the transformation includes the business change we spoke about, the technology change, and there are also enablers, the process, people, and the customer. Customer comes into picture as well. So the business transformation pyramid addresses all three aspects that needs to be considered from a council's perspective when embarking on this journey. And also, like, we need to probably look at, the councils have to look into attracting and retaining staff during the process of this transformation. Because of the duration and the impact, we need to probably attract new staff, the younger staff who understand technology. That might be the case in some instances. So those things have to be kept in the context of what the transformation journey is going to look like. And the communication is going to be the key part of the entire change process, is telling and communicating to the teams is important during the change of the transformation.
So just to add to that, that's good, Ganesh, thank you. Just to add to that, if you tried to align that back to the first slide where we talked about the enablers and we talked about the strategic drivers, the project is delivering those capabilities. The program, if you like, which is the digital transformation or business transformation initiative itself, is actually driving the key business the business changes and the approaches to the business. So the project might deliver components of those changes, but overall there's a management, if you like, of the business moving from current state to target state. And the strategy is the outcome or why we're trying to get there. And so that was where Ganesh was going. The messaging would be slightly different to the different levels of the organization. And as we talk to those different levels of the organization, everybody wants to know why we're changing. What do we get what does it look like when we're changed, and what do we get? And then how are we going to get there? So that's the approach in the messaging and communication.
Thanks, Wayne. Yep.
Ganesh, I might let you talk a little bit about the stakeholder engagement approach as well, using that.
Yes. So identifying the stakeholders is part of the process of the digital transformation. So we've got a quadrant here, the power quadrant that we call it. So we have to do an analysis of the stakeholders we're going to be engaging as part of the transformation. So that the quadrant has 4 squares. So they keep satisfied, monitoring, keep informed, and manage closely. So the powered interest groups for the stakeholders helps us identify during the journey that the stakeholders can fall into different quadrants. So when we are implementing finance, for example, they need to be informed and they need to be actively monitored. But the other groups might be just closely listening or watching what's happening at the program level. But if you look at the customer engagement, then again the quadrant will change between the stakeholders. Some of them will move from keep satisfied to keep informed, or manage closely to monitor. So the stakeholder analysis and understanding of the stakeholders is important. The process will include segmenting the stakeholders as part of the transformation process. So we need to probably group the stakeholders impacted by the transformation and understand their degree of acceptance and resistance that we could encounter as part of the transformation. And then we need to take this as part of the journey to start engaging with the stakeholders, and through the stakeholders, the staff and the various groups within the organization. So each quadrant tiers may have different attitudes towards transformation program, ranging on the broad, continuous form of high acceptance of the transformation to strongly resistant. So when we look at this 2 years program, the first part of the change, and change is something that we need to have a dedicated change program as part of, which starts at the same time as the project or the program implementation. And they are part of the journey all the way through when we start engaging the businesses part of the implementation. So the power promoter provides a sponsorship at the highest level of the leadership and the most powerful level of the transformation. He or she empowers the transformation program and the project managers, but does not mix sponsorship with the project. So we need to probably have the stakeholder groups and also the sponsors who need to be participating in the transformation journey, along with the project teams, supporting them, how we deliver the project. or the program at this instance.
So simply put, the approach, if we keep things a little bit simple to it, we have a transformation period of why, a pyramid of why, what, and how. What we do is we manage messaging to the level of the power interest quadrants, and we have different messaging for people we're managing closely to people that are just monitoring the projects, or people that we need to keep satisfied, and people that we need to keep informed. So we will target that messaging appropriately to the different levels of the why, what, and how, and we'll engage. We'll always have a follow-up engagement to that message to make sure people understand. So there'll be a level of promotion that's done around that within the business, and we have multiple tiers of those. I'll call them change champions, or pit crews. Some I've heard it called that as well within councils. So those sort of promoters help engage the business in the structured manner that we've just depicted there. Ganesh, would you like to talk a lot about why it's so difficult to change sometimes?
So I think, it's, if you look at this diagram of the tree, it seems like, when we look at the change, we think that, okay, fine, it's easy to move, because if you're part of the program, we have a vision, and we say, okay, fine, if you do these 3 things or 4 things, we can move the entire process or the organization towards one way or the other. But if you look closely and apply those various routes of what we're depicting here, is that the change is not linear. It is something that's an approach that we need to probably look at the various root cause or the drivers behind the change, and then we need to probably address how we're going to undertake this change program. So the impact to move to the target state should be understood, or we need to complete the analysis, and the communication and engagement structure against the messaging from the strategic level to the operational level. So we got the strategy, why we are doing it, and when and what we are doing it, and how we are doing it. So we need to translate that messaging from top down for the change to be successful. And this is depicted, and it's not something that if you're looking at a smaller piece of change, sometimes it's easier because you're dealing with one group of people or one team, and it's easier to get them on board. But when you're looking at the organizational change, and over a period of 2 years, we need to probably look at the bigger picture, and then translate it to how we're going to get there to the end target state, and also understand the root causes. What are the political scenarios, the resistance from the team? There could be various factors. We need to probably understand those so that the change becomes effective when we are implementing through the program of work. So digital transformation and organizational changes are complex endeavors that requires careful planning and execution. And we need to probably embrace the holistic approach, engaging teams and fostering effective communications. An organization can negative the transformation journey successfully. So what could happen is, if we don't approach the change in the right way, that can have a negative impact. You might lose the staff, you might lose their interest, and that could also impact negatively because they won't be driven towards the change, and that will take longer for adopting the new automated process or the business transformation or the business benefit we are trying to realize, or we are aiming to realize as part of the business case process. So the change part is the main or a bigger piece of work when you're implementing a project or a program of this digital transformation across an organization or the council, and that needs to be understood and work towards how we can manage this towards the successful delivery of the program when we embark on this journey.
It's a good point, Ganesh. I mean, we've got one client at the moment that's utilising this model as part of their overall transformation. And what they've done is really embraced a spirit of being open with the business. So they have it, they call it under the hood. So what they'll do is they'll have talks with the business. They'll have that key engagement and messaging as we've outlined in the power interest map. they'll have the different levels of communications as well, so different types of communications. So each one of these aspects of the transformation period have different PI maps against them. And again, there's 4 different types of messaging for the same thing. So if we're talking about centralizing procurement, there might be a different discussion at a strategic level, a different discussion at a program level, and a different discussion at project level, which is the capabilities. But within the project level as well, it may be a different discussion depending on where people are talking to, where people are sitting within the power interest map, and then follow-on engagements. And that's the way we've tackled these sorts of approaches, where the root cause analysis here is being tackled by keeping those key stakeholders satisfied that we're moving in the right direction, monitoring the people that are monitoring the project feel comfortable that, you know, those people are being listened to, making sure that everyone's informed about the changes, and then managing key subject matter experts that own those spaces very closely to making sure they feel engaged and they're being heard and their concerns are being listened to and addressed within the transformation. So that's the approach we would be taking all the way through. Easier said than done. It is a big piece of work, but breaking it down into this simple process, we find helps people digest the elephant one chunk at a time, if that makes sense.
And training is important for the staff in this entire journey as well. So training needs analysis and training, and that needs to be incorporated as part of the change process at various levels of the staff involvement.
Thank you, Zoe. I think we've finished there, so we're happy to take any questions.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Wayne, Ganesh and Dylan. We'll move on to the questions from our live audience, and we've got that was such a detailed, informative presentation. I know I've definitely learned a lot after being part of some digital transformation attempts at different councils over the years. So, rightio. So, question 1. As these digital transformations are largely software and can't be capitalised, this is from an accountant.
Yes.
How are councils affording these digital transformations?
Okay. So we've got some of these aspects as part of, because you're right, there is OPEX. We ourselves are also very cognizant of that fact. So what we're trying to do is look at subscription-based solutioning. So being able to manage that OPEX, the intent there is that we're, if you like for like, so we're the capabilities and improvements that are coming through that business case, although it's OPEX, are driving the OPEX reductions we're seeing, or the OPEX improvements we're seeing. So aligning that in part of your business case is quite important. So even if it is subscription-based implementations, they still do have an outcome, which is overall reduction in OPEX or CapEx spend further down the track. There is some elements of CapEx spend, which is, for example, training material developed that can be capitalized and those sorts of things. So there are some components that can be capitalized, but overall it's about those capabilities and those benefits, bankable benefits, being able to be demonstrable within the capabilities that we're improving. So if we talk about, simply put, I gave a very silly example of, administration of managing suppliers from a financial perspective. How much FTE effort is involved in that today? And if we now allowed suppliers to manage their own, insurance updates and work cover updates and things like that, and it was all done through a self-service portal and they did all that admin work, how much does that save us from an admin effort perspective? And does that now help us to, as we expand as a council, not have to put on any more staff in that space? We can use the current staff because they've been freed up and they don't have to do administrative overhead. So we've reduced our future budget OPEX by doing it this way, as an example. Silly example, but you know what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, no, well, that's a very real example. So, okay, next question. Oh, this one's a long one, so bear with me. A hybrid solution adds complexities to small councils that don't have strong core IT capabilities to maintain integration between systems. The big bang approach can also be unaffordable or unable to be resourced at these councils. Do you have any tips on how councils could implement a big bang approach, but in a staged process? What's the best starting point?
Yep, I alluded a little bit to that around the, so the big bang can be broken up. We talked about back office versus front office a little bit. So when I mean big bang, and it's probably not the best wording, but we talk about one integrated solution, what we can do is cut those up into various stages. So I have one client, for example, that's implementing a big bang, but they're doing it in 4 stages because that suits their change management journey. It does mean a bit longer. So it's not really a piecemeal because it is one architecture, but there is some legacy engagement and interim integration and technical debt that needs to be considered. So that reduces that unaffordability issue because it allows one architecture, so it reduces the risk to council, but it does do it at the pace that council can afford it, if that makes sense. So you can still take on a large solution, but you can do it in a staged way. The piecemeal approach means that you could take it on yourself and then you would then need to just plug those pieces of the puzzle together. So both can be delivered or deployed in the same manner. The big bang approach is more around linked up capabilities. So the key thing for us there is when you do, and we talked a little bit about the capitalization of the fixed asset, for example. If I provide a fully automated asset management capability as part of the asset management uplift, but I have no financial fixed asset system to integrate that to and automate to, then I've sort of broken that end-to-end process. So that's what I was referring to, capabilities. So bundling up those capabilities in an appropriate group that can be rolled out in a staged fashion will still allow and manage that affordability concern and the resourcing implications as well.
Well, that's a great segue into our next question. We've got resourcing, given, what did we say, the 80+ years of combined experience. So how many resources do you expect are needed to undertake this level of transformation in a council with about 1,500 people? Wow, that's one of our large city councils, or
It is.
I would say.
Yep. So I'll say it a different way. So let's park the number of people. Let's just look at capabilities, if we like. So let's talk about procurement as a capability and as a grouping. What we would encourage council customers to do is have what I call a product owner or a key subject matter expert, the person that you would want that's well thought of in the council, that's the go-to person that has that knowledge. You'd want to bring that expertise into the project so that they could engage with the business. So we don't need a massive project team. What we do need is key subject matter experts that can drive the thinking towards that target state. So if you looked at that capability, you're talking about a business analyst, and potentially a key product owner. So you are taking one of the experts out of the business, which would need to be backfilled, but you could do that on a very, and someone to do data and someone to do integration. So four people per capability, if that makes sense. So capability being, and if you look at, if I go back, sorry, my bad. Let me go back here. If I talk about capabilities, this is a solutioning view of the capabilities, but you get where my drift is. We're talking about financial management, procurement, and program and project management. So these core capabilities, what I'm saying, we would need that level of that level of resourcing to support. And you could bundle that together. So it could be about, when I'm looking at fixed assets accounting, I could be engaging only the fixed asset accountant just for the accounting components of that overall capability. So it's not a full-time piece. Asset management's maybe a full-time subject matter expert, but we would need to bring on for maybe 2 or 3 months, the fixed asset accountant, so that they're comfortable with the design, and then they might come back and do some testing, and then they might come back around the training, etc. So you would be able to engage key people from the business and manage your backfills accordingly. If I had to gut feel for a 1,500 person council, I think you'd probably have a dedicated team of about 4 or 5, and you would then manage in the key business experts that I was referring to as you needed them, depending on the approach you were taking for the delivery, whether it was a staggered or big bang or staged deployment.
So further to talking about the resources, and you're right, it's just so important to engage with the people who are doing the doing, who are knowing what it needs to be every day. But regardless of size of council, you know, internal resources, external resources from the software provider, would you advise appointing like a third-party implementation partner to assist council independent of your solution provider?
I haven't seen that really work well outside of maybe just the project management, and I'll explain why. I think it's difficult for a third party to really come to grips with the approaches. If you take that picture of the tree that we talked about, it needs somebody that really understands how council works, how your council works. So what we've seen work really well is where there's a key person that can coordinate and lead within council, that has a standing within council that people acknowledge and listen to. It's pretty hard for a third party to take that role, in my view, unless they have a good history with council, and maybe that's the way to look at it. If you do have a third party that has a really solid history with council and they've been there for a while and they're quite well respected, then I think it could work. But I think it's got to be the transformation. The process can be provided by a third party, but the actual transformation itself needs to be owned internally and driven. That's probably my personal opinion on that, but yeah, I've seen that work well.
Yeah, I think that's important, because otherwise the ownership is lost within the organization. Because if you get the third party, they'll probably be more mechanically implementing the process, where we need the engagement with the business and also engagement with the teams to accept and adopt to the new things that we're doing. So the subject matter experts from the business and who understand the stakeholders within the organization will probably be more, better to be utilized in this change and transformation and implementation than getting a third party who's just implementing the solution. And that could be a risk as well that could be avoided if we could, from a resourcing.
Okay. We've almost hit 11 o'clock, but we still have a few questions that I think I'd like to take the opportunity to put to you while we've got you. So for everyone in our audience, please stay on the line. If you've got an extra 10 minutes or so, we can go into overtime. So, so we've got this is a very interesting one. We're currently involved in a digital transformation project with a just-in-time approach to training. My personal opinion is that end users should have been exposed to the system sooner.
Absolutely.
The fear of change. What are your thoughts on the just-in-time training approach?
I couldn't agree more with the person that's asked that question. We encourage those key business experts to be involved right at the start of the design process. So they would want to see a working solution to understand the target state. It's really difficult for council staff to, if they've been working with the same approach for the last 5 to 10 years or longer, to envisage what that new target state looks like when they get a new automated digital transformation. So getting them involved much earlier, right in the design phase, even like I have a mantra with my team where we say, show me, don't tell me. We want to show the council what that new world looks like as early as possible, because it does 2 things. It identifies any key business impacts that may happen. We can address them really early, but it also gets a cohort within the business to understand that new world. And then it also provides you with the ability to have those change champions to be able to say, I've seen the system, this is going to change how we're working as a business. These are the things we're going to be able to get. And then be able to, at the right time, present that and showcase parts of whatever we've built. So if we've built that end-to-end source to settle process, and it might not be 100%, but it might be something we can demonstrate. Let's demonstrate it to the business as early as we can, because then when we do come to train them, they've already seen it 6 months ago. They've been involved in it and they're engaged. And then we can have a proper engagement. So the training shouldn't be the first time they see it, I agree.
And this also ties to the evaluation of the solution, what we were saying in the presentation, where we encourage to have the scenario-based selection process, where we can demonstrate what the end-to-end solution looks like. So when we start building the solution or configuring the solution for the council, they're part of the journey. They're seeing how the system looks and works, and they're not seeing it for the first time when we come into that UAT stage or the training stage. So they're part of the process. They understand what the system capabilities are and what they've changed from the business processes. Like if they're doing something in one way, when they see the system, they might have to change and adopt to the new way of working. So this is all part of the journey, and it can't, when we need to avoid that just-in-time training, because that might not give the right benefit in the transformation journey for the council.
I think also to add to that is that, you know, for those people that are engaged earlier, they become eventually those business experts on the new system as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and they can then promote it, you know, within the organisation whilst that project is actually happening.
Okay, so you recommend from a governance and assurance perspective to best manage this program?
So we sort of recommend a more flat structure. So the approach we would try and look at is transformations require a cadence to get there. So if we're trying to move a whole of business to a new world in 2 years or 1 year or whatever the time frame is that you've set, we need an appropriate cadence of decisions that can be made to meet that time frame, because we need to keep that engine room, which is the project, moving in the right capacity. So we'll need some key business decisions. So we encourage a design, I call it a design authority for want of a better term, a governance forum where key business owners and managers are brought in to understand the target state, the capability, and any key decisions. So for example, I put a controversial one around centralizing procurement as a center of excellence. Not as an organizational structure, just as a center of excellence. That may not suit council. That may be a decision that council doesn't want to move to, but it could be something that's discussed, reviewed, and then that design decision is then provided back to the project team to move forward with. So those sort of key business decisions and understanding of the business impacts, etc., are probably the paramount component of the governance structure. That design authority can then bring that back to a strategic program steering committee or a group that can help sign off on strategic changes. So where there's operational changes, that design authority is empowered to make those operational changes within the context of their overall digital transformation journey that we've identified earlier in the business case. But the strategic changes may then be flowed up to the executive group to make the ultimate decision and then flow back down through. So an agile, more a flatter structured decision-making group is probably key to meet the cadence required for the transformation.
I think the catch there is also the digital transformation where the product owners or the business participate in that decision authority to make those changes. So it's in addition to the governance structure the councils will have for the steering group for this change. And we are saying that we need to have that design authority that also helps change the business process.
And if you play that back to the previous question of show me, don't tell me, the only way they're going to know is if they've seen the system and they can make the appropriate decisions. Because we're talking about a business change. We're showing you the solution, but the business change accompanies that discussion, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, that wraps up our questions. There were some fantastic questions from our audience. Thank you, audience. Come along to our next webinars and ask just as great questions. So thank you so much to our, you've given us so much to think about with any upcoming digital transformations we may be seeing at our organisations. But it's also a lot of information just about general change management and the importance of engaging early and communicating at every step, at every level. So I wanted to thank everyone out there for their attendance. Before you all drop off from our committee, so registration is closing next week for the Finance Professionals Forum. There's 2 events being held, Friday the 14th of July in Brisbane and Thursday the 20th of July in Cairns. Details on the presenters and how to register on our website under events. Getting quickly as there's training. Mark your diaries for the 2023 annual conference, our flagship event being held on the Gold Coast from the 21st to the 24th of November. I don't think it coincides with schoolies. I think we're lucky. Now, a copy of this webinar will be available on the YouTube channel over the coming days. It will be available to members through the members library. Talking about our members portal, if you want some advice or have a question for our community, pop it on the LGFP members network. And remember that you can find our newsletters in our newsletter archive. If you want to be on the mailing list, please email admin@lgfp.org.au. That's admin@lgfp.org.au. So thanks again to Wayne and Ganesh and Dylan for an informative sessions.